All right, thank you for joining us on ABC 24 Plus. I'm Ruben Diaz. Right now, Shelby County's mayor is preparing to give an update on what he calls fairness and accountability to Shelby County taxpayers. Mayor Lee Harris plans to discuss legal proceedings over detainees that are held at the Shelby County Division of Corrections. Now, according to Harris, this is burdening the county's taxpayers. Now, we actually expect to hear from Mayor Harris and the county's attorney's office, Chief of Litigation Lee Whitwell as well. Again, this news all came out yesterday or earlier today when we were informed that there would be a press conference and it would be an opportunity for the mayor to speak. You're taking a live look right now at that's the podium where the mayor will be, Mayor Lee Harris will be, along with other members and officials, where they're going to be discussing this accountability that they've been referencing. There's been some conversation over who's footing the bill for some of this when it comes to the detainees and where that money's coming from and how much taxpayers are having to pay for this to actually be done. This is all taking place in downtown Memphis. Again, we're going to keep an eye on this podium, and as soon as they step to the podium and get ready to speak, then we will take you to that spot. First, let's recap a little bit of how we got here and why kind of we're doing this. You know, in November, a news conference was happening on detainees. That's where Mayor Harris claimed that somewhere between 200 and 250 people a week had been housed at Jail East instead of at 201 Poplar. Now, that was more than 300% of an increase from the same time back in 2024. Mayor Harris announced that at that time, he was taking steps to deal with that overflow issue and how that could be resolved here in the Memphis area. Unfortunately, since that time, there have been more detainees, more arrests, more detentions, right? And so the overcrowding seems to continue to be an issue at 201 Poplar when it comes to how they're going to house all of these detainees, and then who's paying for them to be housed. You see some people starting to get their microphones ready and kind of be prepared for this news conference to begin. It was supposed to have started at 1:30, but we all know sometimes things get in the way and we can end up running a little bit behind. So we're going to be waiting patiently until they get started. Now, this is, again, going to be a press conference. We call it a press conference. It's going to be a briefing, basically, about what he calls fairness and accountability for the taxpayers of Shelby County. The conversation here at this point really becomes about who's footing the bill for all of the detainees and how is that money going to be reimbursed? Is the federal government involved in that? Basically, where does that money come from? And is it fair for the Shelby County taxpayers to be paying for those detainees based on the way that this has all transpired? Again, waiting for Mayor Lee Harris to take the stage there and begin this press conference. He does plan to discuss a few things, including the legal proceedings over the detainees that are held at the Shelby County Division of Corrections. There are a large number of detainees being held there, and the process, as we all know and have discussed over the last several months, the process is slow. Now, there have been conversations about how to speed up that process, including things like potentially doing night court or bringing in other attorneys and prosecutors to help with some of that overflow. But at this point, it's still a slow process. And when you have a slow process, that means that people are being held in jail while they await for their trial dates and while they await for their hearings. So that's where some of this has now come to a head, is how do we get the money to pay for all of this and who's paying for it and how do we speed up the process? According to Mayor Harris, this whole process is becoming a major burden on the Shelby County taxpayers. Now, we expect to hear from not only from Mayor Harris, but also from the county attorney's office, chief of litigation. His name is Lee Whitwell. Now, again, this all has kind of been coming to a head over the last several months, including back in November when there was another news conference. Again, it was about the detainees. At that time, Mayor Harris claimed that somewhere between 200 and 250 people a week were being housed at Jail East instead of at 201. That tells you the scope of the overcrowding, right? There wasn't enough room at 201. So up to 250 people a week were being housed at Jail East instead of at 201. That was a more than 300% increase from just the same time back in 2024. Mayor Harris then announced that he was going to be taking steps to deal with those overflow issues. He did not say exactly what those steps were. In fact, we've all kind of been waiting to see what those steps could entail. We're waiting to hear from Mayor Lee Harris and other officials. Again, this is all taking place in downtown Memphis at this point in time. The conversation centering around how and who should be paying for these detainees, and if the Shelby County taxpayers are paying for them, what cost is that to Shelby County taxpayers, and is that a fair cost for Shelby County taxpayers? Now, The mayor, Shelby County's Mayor Lee Harris, did give us a brief statement earlier, a brief synopsis of the conversation that was going to be had today about what was going to be taking place during this press conference, which he said was about fairness and accountability for the taxpayers of Shelby County. But there was not a lot of elaboration about what all would be discussed and if any plans had come in place at this point in time about this Shelby County taxpayer issue that he had been discussing. At this point, there had been no discussion or no outward plans revealed about other options for where to jail some of the detainees, where to hold some of the detainees, and what to do to reimburse the city if that was the case, how to move and navigate the bodies from Jail East or 201 Poplar to other facilities. There had been some discussion at one point about maybe using other facilities, out-of-state facilities, moving people across state lines or even other parts of the state where there might be some availability in some beds. None of that has been made public at this point, and no, doesn't sound like any plans had been written in stone, so to speak. So at this point, it's still kind of a guessing game and a question mark of what's going to happen when it comes to how long detainees can be held and who's paying for those detainees. Again, this press conference was supposed to start roughly 6 minutes ago. Sometimes we get into these situations where they don't exactly start on time. It's been more often than not, really. And so when that happens, we're just going to have to play the waiting game, wait for Mayor Lee Harris and the other officials to get to that podium and start this conversation about what's going to be happening and why he's calling this a press conference about fairness and accountability for Shelby County taxpayers. At this point, we don't really know what he's going to reveal or what points he's planning to make, just that he's going to be focusing on the fact that Shelby County taxpayers may not be getting a fair shake when it comes to detainees and how they're being held. So we will continue to monitor the situation. We'll continue to monitor that podium right there. Again, nobody is at the podium at this point in time. This is all taking place in downtown Memphis, where we're waiting for Mayor Lee Harris to take center stage and start to discuss what he's called this press conference for. Part of this is to discuss the legal proceedings over the detainees that are being held at the Shelby County Division of Corrections. Now, obviously, a big portion of that would be the length of time that people are being held, coupled against the amount of people being brought in almost daily at this point. There was already an overcrowding issue at 201 Poplar. There's already an overcrowding issue in Shelby County Jail. But now with the Memphis Safe Task Force and the number of arrests that have been made, the overcrowding issue has become somewhat of a massive issue, meaning that there's just not enough room for people to be housed and wait for their day in court. And at this point, people don't know when that day in court will be because of the backlog of cases. Now, according to Mayor Lee Harris, this is part of the problem, that this is part of the reason that this becomes such a major burden on Shelby County taxpayers. Now, we do hope to hear from Mayor Lee Harris here any minute now, as well as the County Attorney's Office Chief of Litigation. His name is Lee Whitwell. This is all part of an ongoing conversation about not only the detainees, but the length of the time that people are being detained and held without getting to have hearings or get to court, and also the cost that's incurred with each of these people that is being detained. Nobody's detained for free, right? It costs money to house each individual person. So when you're talking about having people in Shelby County Jail for months on end while they await their hearings and their trial dates, that becomes a massive burden that somebody has to pay. Hence the press conference today, where Mayor Lee Harris wants to point out what he believes is an accountability issue and a lack of fairness for Shelby County taxpayers. This hasn't just popped up today. It's something that we've been discussing and hearing about for the last several months. As early back as November, that's when Mayor Lee Harris held a press conference about those detainees. That's where he claimed that about 200 to 250 people a week were actually being housed at Jail East instead of at 201 Poplar, because of overcrowding issues. Again, that was back in November, and there have been more arrests made since then, and the process still isn't any faster than it was back in November. So you can imagine that there could be even more of an overcrowding issue at this point than there was even at that point in time. Now, that was a more than 300% increase from the same time a year ago. Obviously, with the Memphis Safe Task Force and the number of arrests that have been made, an increase was evident, but a 300% increase might be more than what some people had planned on. Before the Memphis Safe Task Force actually began, there had already been some conversation about what was going to happen to people who were arrested. Where would they go? Because 201 Poplar was already overcrowded. During the press conference in November, Mayor Lee Harris did announce that he was, at that time, taking steps to deal with the overflow and overcrowding issue. But there were no specific steps outlined. Nobody has given any specific steps. Instead, most of the conversation over the last several months has been the need to build a new jail, not necessarily what the steps are going to be right now as you try to deal with the current overcrowding issue. That issue isn't going anywhere, and that issue is going to continue as long as the process takes what it takes. At one point, there was some conversation about having a night court at some point to potentially even have more avenues and opportunities to get people processed through Shelby County Jail. That was an idea that had been floated. There have been no specific plans laid out, at least for us in the media, to be able to tell you this is the plan that Shelby County is going with at this point in time. Again, we're about 10 minutes, 11 minutes past what should have been the beginning of this press conference. We are still waiting to see when they will actually get there. We're waiting to hear what Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris has to say when it comes to this. He called this press conference to discuss accountability for Shelby County taxpayers and fairness for Shelby County taxpayers, which one can only allude would mean that he wants to discuss the detainees and the cost of the detainees as it relates to Shelby County taxpayers and what people are having to pay to keep these people detained over long periods of time. And the length of the time also is an issue just because the process moves very slowly in Shelby County, as everybody knows. That's where the overcrowding has come from. It takes a while to get people processed, and at times people can be in there for longer than the allotted legal amount of time before they actually get their first hearing. And so there's some overcrowding issues that were evident before the Memphis Safe Task Force ever began, and that have just been amplified with the number of people who've been arrested in the last several months. Now, again, we're waiting to hear from Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris, who is supposed to be giving us an update on what he calls fairness and accountability for Shelby County taxpayers. I saw there were a few. I believe we have a reporter in the room as well. Our Ezekiel Telemaco is there as well, so he'll be taking notes and listening to Mayor Lee Harris to be able to give us even more information later on throughout the day during our newscasts at 5, 6, 9, and 10. Now, the plan here eventually is for Mayor Lee Harris to discuss legal proceedings over detainees that are being held at the Shelby County Division of Corrections. The problem here is that there is a large number of detainees and a large overflow and overcrowding issue, an overcrowding issue that doesn't seem to have an immediate plan to fix. So that's why we are waiting to hear from Mayor Lee Harris, who obviously forgot that he said this was going to start at 1:30 because we're just waiting for him at this point in time. According to Harris, this is a burden to the Shelby County taxpayers. The problem here is that somebody's got to foot the bill for detainees, and when you increase the number of detainees, then the bill just gets higher, right? Somebody's got to pay for it. So we expect to hear from him and hear what his solutions might be, or maybe some information that he wants to share to the severity of the problem and the severity of the tax bill that Shelby County taxpayers are footing at this point. That's not the only person we plan to hear from. We eventually plan to hear from the County Attorney's Office Chief of Litigation, Lee Whitwell, as well, at some point when they finally do get to that podium. Again, this all taking place in downtown Memphis as we're just waiting and waiting for Mayor Lee Harris to finally take that podium and begin this conversation that was supposed to start roughly 14 minutes ago at this point in time. Now, I could continue to recap this for you a little bit while we wait. Again, we're just both playing the waiting game at this point. We'll recap kind of where this has been going and how we've gotten here and why this has become the massive issue that it's become. As early back as November, so just a couple of months ago, Mayor Lee Harris did hold a press conference about detainees. At that point in time, he also had the mother of somebody who had passed away at 201 Poplar. She spoke on Zoom about some of the issues that they had experienced. There were people within the community there as well. Okay, it looks like Mayor Lee Harris is getting to the podium, so we're going to go listen in and hear what he has to say.
Okay, thanks for being here. We're here today because Shelby County taxpayers are being asked to pay a bill that is not theirs. For the last several months, Shelby County has housed individuals for the state of Tennessee in the Shelby County Division of Corrections while being paid nothing at all. Housing an incarcerated person is expensive. It requires staffing and medical care, food, security, and infrastructure. Shelby County government is currently in the Claims Commission with the state of Tennessee over this matter because this is the only avenue that is afforded to us under Tennessee state law. Our foot is on the gas with respect to this issue because it is so significant and it affects taxpayers. If we can get a fair amount, the vast majority of our budget deficit that we have faced for years will be resolved. However, if we cannot get the state to pay the bill that it owes, that means we will be left with very few options and we will be working hard to avoid a significant tax increase. Okay, let's go to the slide. So this graphic shows you the increase in funds transferred from our general fund, paid for by taxpayers, to the Division of Corrections in order to cover the costs that are properly attributable to the state of Tennessee. Again, less than a year ago, in July of 2025, the state stopped paying for inmates housed in Shelby County Division of Corrections, for which it is responsible. Not only are we receiving $0 from the state for housing its inmates that they are bound to pay for, but the state pulled the funding at a time of high inflation when the costs faced by Shelby County continue to rise. As seen on the chart, in fiscal year 2020, we had to transfer, well, 2020 is not on the chart. Okay. In fiscal year 2023, we had to transfer $20.1 million in order to cover the cost of housing inmates on the state's behalf. In fiscal year 2024, that cost shot up to $27.5 million. And in fiscal year 2025, we had to transfer $30 million from our general fund in order to compensate or reimburse for services rendered to care for the inmates that are state inmates. We expect that the amount taxpayers will have to come up to pay the state's tab will be even more in fiscal 26 and beyond. Let's go to the next slide. This shows you the current rates for housing inmates. The state of Tennessee is currently, assuming this offer is still on the table, offering to pay Shelby County government $41 per day per inmate that is housed with the Shelby County Division of Corrections. These are inmates that we are holding on behalf of the Tennessee Department of Corrections. These are inmates that are the responsibility of the state. Meanwhile, as you can see from the slide, U.S. Marshal Services, which also uses the services of Shelby County government to hold individuals that it is responsible for, pays us $120 per day per detainee of the U.S. Marshal Service. At the same time, the state of Tennessee, which also has an arrangement with Metro Nashville to house individuals for which the state is responsible for, and the state of Tennessee pays Metro Nashville $132 per day per individual. So the current offer, assuming it is still live from the state, is $41 a day, and possibly as leverage, the state has paid $0 per day, while at the same time paying Metro Nashville $132 per day per individual. The Shelby County Division of Corrections currently has 959 individuals that we are holding for the Tennessee Department of Correction. That is a majority of the individuals that we are holding. And so most of our costs are tied up with a bill that the state will not satisfy. At this time, in order to update the community on this important matter, I've asked the attorneys that are representing Shelby County government and the Claims Commission to appear to give a brief update about the status of our case against the state of Tennessee, but also to be present for a few questions afterward. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Lee Whitwell from the current County Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Harris. I'm Lee Whitwell with the County Attorney's Office. This is an obligation of the state of Tennessee. This is not an obligation under state law of Shelby County. Shelby County is bearing the burden for something that the state has the legal obligation to do. If we can go, I think we've got that slide there. This is the law. This is a statute 4-6-102, which says the management and government of the state penitentiaries for adults are vested in the Department of Correction. That's the Tennessee Department of Correction. Moreover, in 41-8-106, no county shall be required to house convicted felons sentenced to more than 1 year of continuous confinement unless the county, through the authority of its county legislative body, has chosen to contract with the Department of Correction for the purpose of housing those felons. If a county does not reach such a contract, then TDOC, the Tennessee Department of Corrections, has 2 weeks to come and pick up those inmates. In July of 2025, we failed to reach an agreement that was fair and equitable on behalf of county taxpayers. And so because we failed to reach that agreement under state law, TDOC had 2 weeks to come and pick up these inmates. It did not do that. We gave them another month of just good faith time for them to come and pick up those inmates or to pay us a fair rate. They did not do that either, so we filed suit. We filed suit in the Tennessee Claims Commission, which is the appropriate venue when one has suffered monetary harm by the state or a state entity. That's why that claim was filed in that venue. The Tennessee Claims Commission received our complaint, and we have moved to prosecute that case aggressively since then. The state filed a motion to dismiss, asking the Claims Commission to find that we had no causes of action for breach of contract or any other theory. The Claims Commission denied the state's motion with respect to our breach of contract claims. Normally, typically when you see a claim commission or a court deny a motion to dismiss, they simply deny it on the grounds that a potential cause of action in the future may exist. Here, the Claims Commission went a step further. The Claims Commission found, as a matter of law, right then and there, that the state of Tennessee and TDOC breached this contract. That's the slide that you see in front of you right here. This is the finding of the Claims Commission. It says the Claims Commission finds the state of Tennessee, by failing to remove its inmates from the Shelby County Correction Center on or before June 30th, 2025, breached the contract. The Claims Commission has left open to what degree damages, what amount of damages the county is entitled to. We have continued to press aggressively to try to get this case tried as soon as possible, because every day that we wait, Shelby County taxpayers are suffering. We're not receiving money for work that we're doing that's the responsibility of TDOC. Those are the only updates that we have at this time on the litigation.
Maybe if we can go back to the rates for a minute. Okay, and our last submission to the state around this to substantiate our cost per inmate was submitted, and that comes in at $110 per inmate per day. So we're happy to make those materials available as well to the extent they could be helpful. But the point is this is probably the most important, in fact, I know it is, the most important issue with respect to the financial outlook for our local government. And so we think it's important to update the public and to try as best we can to continue to put pressure on the state that it has to pay its bills, and paying nothing for the services rendered by Shelby County government is inappropriate. Okay, at this time we'll take a couple questions.
Mayor Harris,
Yeah.
Lucas Finley, Commercial Appeal. This is kind of two-parter. When you're talking about the differences between what they're paying Metro Nashville and what they're paying reason as to why they're refusing to pay, or why they're saying we're only going to pay a third, essentially, of what Metro Nashville is being paid? And then, are other counties being paid differently as well, or do you guys not know all that number?
So in general, we believe, with respect to your last question, that this is an issue that primarily is connected with the work that Metro Davidson County does and Shelby County government does. Now, it is true that there is activity in the other counties in relationship to the state, and they are probably not being paid a fair amount either. However, the arrangement with Metro Davidson County, Metro Nashville, and with Shelby County is unique, and I think all parties agree it's unique because of the scale of the tension that is involved. And so as you saw from the previous slide, Shelby County government is in this thing to the tune of $30 million and rising. And so this is one of the biggest issues we have, is trying to get the state to pay up the money that it owes, because if we receive that, if this issue is resolved, then Shelby County will have the flexibility it needs to avoid a tax increase and other drastic measures. So hopefully this will be resolved. What was the first part of the question?
If the state had given a reason why the difference between us and that.
So last year we had one meeting with the Commissioner of Corrections, and I'm not sure how long he has been there and so forth. But this has been an issue that has been running for years. I've previously met with the previous leadership at the Tennessee Department of Corrections trying to address this issue. And we did the best we could to downsize our relationship with the state as a response. The latest meeting with the Commissioner for Corrections was his reasons was he had all the power and that we had none. And so therefore, we had to take whatever he wanted to give us, and that was it. So he came down with a cadre of individuals and more or less told us, take it or leave it, and we would have no recourse. And that he would do whatever he felt like. He may or may not pick up inmates. He may or may not do other things, and he made no commitment to solve this issue for us, even though this is the biggest issue for our financial outlook.
What's your total deficit, including that?
Well, those are yearly deficits, and so our deficit for the year that we are in is still being determined. But our best guess is that the deficit for the year that we're in is going to be more than the previous deficits that you saw on this slide. And so, I mean, it's critically important that we solve this. It's also critically important, given the size of this problem, that we bring this kind of update to the public and to those who are interested in this.
Could you refuse to take future state prisoners?
So I'd have to defer to the lawyers on that.
I think that's just difficult to say at this point in regard to our attempts to mediate this issue. We have asked to mediate this issue a number of times in the hopes to come to the table and resolve this. And we have been, that's been rejected numerous times. We have tried to move this case along, if it's not going to be mediated, to a quick trial. And that has not been something that the state has agreed to either. They have fought us at every turn in every step that we have tried to take to resolve this quickly. But I think what would happen with regard to future inmates is a particular detail that would, I don't think I can comment on that because of our attempts to resolve this.
As you mentioned, this has been an issue for years prior, and with the Memphis Safe Task Force, having an increase in arrests, tell me about the relationship that's having with an issue that's already been present on top of an increase in inmates. And also, with that being said, Sheriff Floyd Bonner made a comment and wanted to know your response to what's being done to help with the intake problems that they're having with the increase in arrests.
So remember, just for background, the facility that we're talking about is the corrections facility at the penal farm. So this is the corrections facility at Shelby Farms, and this is distinct and separate from the crisis that is now ongoing at 201 Poplar. So I've not received anything from the sheriff around how he will reform and take efforts to mitigate the crisis at 201 Poplar. So I'm hesitant to make comment without seeing where he is. But hopefully he will come up with a plan. The plans that have been shared with me so far have been insufficient. To return to this topic, I will say in our efforts to deal with the state, we've been dealing with this issue for years, but at this point, it is at an important inflection point. And our effort to deal with the state over the years, I mean, right now, recently, we've made offer after offer. And so we've made offers that we are willing to lose some money compared to our cost experienced if you would just pay something more than what the current offer is, i.e. $41 was the previous offer that they made. They refused that. And again, I think the last offer we made was something around $90 per inmate per day as a temporary compromise as we work through these issues. But Shelby County government can neither afford to house state inmates for $41 a day, which was their previous offer, assuming that offer is still live, nor can we afford to house the state inmates for $0 a day, which is what's happening right now because they haven't paid us for nearly a year.
Probably one more question. Attorney Whitwell, what does damages look like in here? Is this back pay? Is this removing all the inmates? What damages are you guys seeking through this?
Well, I think that's something that's going to have to be determined by the Claims Commission, but it's our position that we should be paid an appropriate fee as far as the contract lapsed, and we then started continuing to house these inmates for no money. So whether that amount is as much as Nashville makes at a minimum or more, I think that's something that the Claims Commission is going to have to determine. But what we're being offered now and what was on the table now is far below what's an appropriate amount.
Ezekiel from ABC 24. If there's no resolution to this matter, how much can we expect the taxes to go up for taxpayers in Shelby County?
Well, I don't want to say at this juncture, but you saw the chart and see the losses are as much as $30 million or more every single year. And so I'll leave it to others to do the math on that, what kind of tax rate increase it would take to cover this $30 million per year that is properly the responsibility of the state. So we haven't gotten quite that far in my deliberations, and so I don't want to put a number out there until we reach that point. Hopefully, with more awareness, the state, which is now in session, will do something to resolve this issue, or at least provide Shelby County with more avenues to address this issue, because the only way that state law sets up for us to resolve this issue is to bring a case to the Claims Commission. Of course, there's been one matter adjudicated already, or nothing. And so we would love to see the state come forward in good faith to mediate this issue, make a counteroffer to our offer that is reasonable, or some other avenue to resolve it to surface. All right.
When's your next hearing?
We're not scheduled for a hearing per se at this moment. Our motion to dismiss, as I mentioned earlier, the state's motion to dismiss, that was denied by the Claims Commission. The state then turned around and filed a motion seeking reconsideration of that denial, and we promptly filed a response in opposition. But for the most part, a lot of what happens in the Claims Commission is done on the briefing. We have asked for a trial to happen as soon as possible, perhaps in June. The state is pushing back on that. Again, we are trying to move aggressively on this, so we want it tried as soon as possible, but it will probably not be that soon. But we're hopeful.
Tri-State Defender, last question.
All right.
Mayor, you hinted at
other drastic measures in the event that this isn't resolved? Can you hint further or further explain?
Well, usually when you face a deficit this large as a result of a partner not paying their tab, you have only a couple of options. There are, belt tightening measures, in other words, cuts that can be brought down, which will impact the service delivery for all Shelby County residents, or you look for other places to generate revenue, which would be on the backs of Shelby County taxpayers in order to cure a deficit that's created by the failure to pay by the state of Tennessee. Okay, very good. Thanks very much.
All right, you have been listening to Mayor Lee Harris and Lee Whitwell, who's obviously with the mayor's office and the chief attorney there. They've been handling this case. Let me recap a couple of things real quick, and then we'll get out of here and get you ready on for the rest of your day. It's important to note that this conversation is centered around the correctional facility at the Penal Farm over at the Shelby Farms area, not 201 Poplar. So the inmates that are being housed, this is not at 201 Poplar, totally different facility, just so we're all clear. One of the key points that Mayor Lee Harris was making is that the current offer from the state to pay for their housed inmates was $41 a day, which Shelby County rejected. They need, according to his calculations, their actual cost is more like $110 a day. It was also important to note that the state is currently paying Metro Nashville, $132 a day for their inmates right now, whereas, again, they were offering to pay $41 a day to Shelby County. This has created a massive issue when it comes to the debt. $30,000 had to be transferred to cover the debt from last year, and they're expecting even more for this upcoming fiscal year. All right, we'll have much more on this coming up on your ABC 24 News at 5, 6, and 10 as well. Stay with us. We'll be back at 5 o'clock for even more.
Continue with us and watch free now on the 24 Plus app everywhere you stream.